Hi friends, and welcome back to Marvelous Friends, your home for all things Marvel Cinematic Universe and beyond. I'm Rhett, and today I'm going to be talking about all the girls in Peter Parker's life. Roll that credit. Before I get started, I do have to give the official notice that there are spoilers ahead. So if you have not seen Spider-Man Far From Home, feel free to click off this video right now. You can click the card to enjoy some of my spoiler-free content. Now, this is going to be the official last video that I include this notification on. So, anything that is related to Spider-Man moving forward, it will of course be in the title, and if you have not yet seen the films, do not watch it. I just have to say it's been 2 weeks now, so I just will not be including this notification from here on out. In Spider-Man Far From Home, we received two post-credit scenes. The first one in the mid-credit scene sequence is the one I'm going to be talking about in this video. Now, in this, we saw the one and only J. Jonah Jameson return to the MCU Spider-Verse. And with this, he came with some breaking news. Now, in this, we saw him reveal a video that Mysterio released to the Daily Bugle, which in this iteration is like an online kind of gossip news organization blog. So obviously, yes, we saw this broadcasted in New York City specifically, but I'm sure this went worldwide as it is a web-based news platform. In this, we saw Mysterio try to set up and discredit Spider-Man quite a bit, trying to again play off that he was the hero and that Spider-Man unjustly killed him. Though again, I do not believe that Mysterio is actually dead and that he's very much so alive, this just being another one of his illusions for him to pop up again later in the franchise. In this, it goes on though for him to reveal that Peter Parker is actually Spider-Man. Now, this comes with some very interesting implications for the Spider-Man story, as we've never really seen him massively exposed with his identity. We've seen, of course, villains figure out who he is and the repercussions of that, but we've never really seen the repercussions on a massive scale for Peter with everyone knowing who he is. And this opens up some very interesting storylines. And like Kevin Feige said, this is going to be a film that has not yet been explored in the MCU, and I think that falls right in line with this. Him being exposed publicly as Spider-Man isn't something we've seen before, and it's definitely going to allow for some very interesting storylines. I have no problem saying it. Tom Holland's Peter Parker is a good-looking guy. And in the comics as well, Peter Parker, though often displayed as very kind of a nerdy, awkward guy at times, is still very handsome and a big catch for many of the women of the comic book world. Now, at the end of Spider-Man Far From Home, we saw officially our version of MJ, aka Mary Jane, in the form of Zendaya's Michelle, officially come into a relationship with Peter Parker. And this Mary Jane is, of course, the most well-known and popular relationship of Peter. However, it is far from the only one. And we will, of course, need something to test this newfound relationship come Spider-Man 3. And what better way to do that than having a mass of girls throwing themselves at Peter Parker, as he is now a celebrity of sorts as a newly openly named Avenger. This could open up a plethora of female roles for Spider-Man 3, not only adding to the characters, but also the problems Peter faces with his new identity crisis as he is exposed to the world. Not only that, but adding to the tension as he deals with a very jealous MJ. If you're not familiar with the Mary Jane comic book character, she has a tendency for some strong jealousy, often causing some tension and issues for the relationship in the comics. But let's have some fun with this, shall we? That's right, this is going to be a countdown video, with me counting down the 10 girls I would like to see most pop up vying for Peter Parker / Spider-Man's attention. Now, of course, I am not going to include MJ in this video. She's going to be in the movie. Obviously, she is his current girlfriend. And I will say this right here and now, I do predict that the two of them will ultimately still end up together. Peter able to show and prove his loyalty to her in some way in the action of the film. That being said, though, let's get started with number 10. Number 10, Michelle Gonzalez. I've said this before, I predict that Spider-Man 3 will see Peter Parker finally leave high school behind and move off to college, and he'll need a roommate for college. Of course, I'm sure we'll see him plan to room with Ned, but I predict number 3 on this list will cause a major issue for that plan, leaving Peter to look for another roommate. Insert Vincent Gonzalez here now. Now, Vincent is the brother of Michelle and is a roommate of Peter during the comic books. Now, Michelle, of course, is not a fan of Peter when they first meet, not really liking him all that much. Now, this could easily play into what we know about the MCU right now and Peter Parker, him being exposed and being blamed for Mysterio's death. Perhaps Michelle was a fan of Mysterio and believes his story, and so is not trusting of Peter because he is also Spider-Man. Ultimately, though, when Vincent is kidnapped and taken away, the two of them work together and become closer, developing some romantic feelings between the two, which would play well into the story in many ways. However, she is at number 10, though, because of the name Michelle. I personally don't want to see another Michelle introduced to the MCU, as his main girlfriend right now is MJ, yes, but her name is Michelle. I just don't like the conflict there. I think it would be a great story, but perhaps using a different character. Number 9, Silver Sablinova. You may recognize the name Silver Sable a lot better. Now, she, of course, is an anti-hero who becomes linked romantically to Peter Parker via Spider-Man, and I like this idea as well. We have some characters coming at Peter Parker, as well as some as Spider-Man, both kind of vying for his attention. Now, of course, she is an anti-hero, kind of dealing with the ideas of both doing good, especially when interacting with other MCU heroes. However, she is a mercenary and is at times put against our characters as well. Though I have to admit right here, she is probably my lesser favorite of the two main anti-hero girlfriends of Peter Parker, which has landed her more towards the bottom of this list. However, because she does have more run-ins with the MCU overall, it's hard to deny her usefulness for Marvel Studios, her being able to be used outside the Spider-Verse a lot more, this giving her a lot more potential as a character. There would need to be some tweaks to her character to make her more age appropriate for our Peter Parker, but that's rather simple, making her the heiress of the Silver Sable Corporation rather than the actual CEO and director of it, putting her at his age rather than much older, making the relationship a little bit more feasible for the overall story. Number 8, Jean DeWolff. I'm sure this is a character name that does not ring any bells for you, as she isn't necessarily a big player. She is someone who has a crush on Peter that is not reciprocated, and Peter doesn't find out until later when she dies due to a villain attack. This does have some impact on the character, though, as they are close and friendly in the story. However, again, he not realizing that she really had feelings for him, which plays well into this story as well. I'm sure he's going to come across many characters that he becomes friends with, and that learns later on that they actually have feelings for him because he's a celebrity and he's cute and all of that. Now, this would also play in well because the fact that Marvel Studios could take a lot of liberties with this character. Her being lesser known allows for a lot of freedom to round out the character. More so, though, this allows for a big reference while creating a whole new character. Thanks to the kind of ambiguously gendered name of Jean, we could see them adapt this into a male character, this allowing for more representation within the MCU and adding an LGBT character that potentially has a larger role than some of the ones we've seen up to this point. Him being a gay or bi male that has a crush on Peter, but not necessarily feeling comfortable to approach him about it because he knows, of course, Peter is in a relationship with a female. This would allow for some very interesting storylines and, again, some great representation that I know the MCU is looking for moving forward, while still providing a great nod and reference for a character name that some fans may recognize. Number 7, Kitty Pryde. Now, this one, I admit myself, is a long shot, which is why she is rather low on this list, but I had to include her all the same. Now, of course, we are not receiving the X-Men for several years, but as I have stated multiple times in videos, that does not mean that we won't start being introduced to characters and references to the future X-Men team sooner rather than later. And Kitty Pryde would be a perfect example of this, as she's already been partially set up in that second post-credit scene of this movie in relation to the potentially development of the space station that is where S.W.O.R.D. is housed, as she has ties to that. Now, this would be a really interesting thing as we see Peter introduced to Kitty, then developing a bond now, and then running into her again once she is joined up with the X-Men. If you don't recognize the name, she is a regular of the X-Men teams known as Shadowcat, and she often is a partner of a little dragon known as Lockheed, which is the plant of sword, which I mentioned in that whole video. You can watch it up here in the card to learn more about that whole reference. Anyways, this would be really interesting and great little tie-in to see this happen now, as like I said, this would be a great tie-in to set up the future steps of X-Men, much like we have seen other things already kind of laid out as well. Number 6, Glory Grant. Now in the comics, of course, the two never officially dated, but just had a very flirtatious relationship. Glory was a supermodel who lived down the hall from Peter Parker, and I think this would be a very interesting aspect to the whole dynamic of women fighting for Peter's attention. Because who doesn't love a good celebrity power couple? Her as a young starlet or model even, trying to align herself as Peter to create this kind of celebrity showmance. The two may even not actually officially date, just having this kind of PR showmance to kind of help bounce him back from that negative PR from the setup from Mysterio. I think it would add a really interesting character for the story and potential storyline for it. I think because she is a little bit of a lesser known, like many of the characters that could have potentially put on this list, it allows for a lot of freedom for Marvel Studios to really develop the character how they want. And I think it would be something that would be very new compared to all the other girlfriends we've seen in the past that have been in the Marvel Spider-Man and Sony Spider-Man movies. Number 5, Debra Whitman. In the comics, she actually does expose Peter Parker as Spider-Man to the world, dating him and then writing a tell-all book that gives away his identity. Now, of course, in the MCU, his identity is already exposed, but she would play well here into that story because of that same aspect. Her dating him for more darker personal gain motives, really kind of driving a wedge between MJ and Peter to get him for herself, ultimately to reveal that she doesn't really care about Peter or their relationship. She's just doing it to get a little bit of 15 minutes of fame for herself to kind of promote whatever she's working on, whether it be a book or something like that. Again, this is all on the premise that we're seeing a little bit older characters, with Peter now being in college, so I think that would play it well with that idea. Number 4, Felicia Hardy. Now, this was a character that was hinted and we did actually see in Amazing Spider-Man 2, but never came to fruition because of everything that happened with the Amazing Spider-Man franchise. So it's time that we finally receive her, and I think that she would be a great addition to the story. She, of course, is an anti-hero known as Black Cat, who is a cat burglar that has many run-ins with Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, over the years. Now, she has more of a relationship with Spider-Man initially, developing feelings for him, and then eventually learning that he is Peter Parker and dating both of them. It would make a very, very interesting story as we see Peter Parker dating Michelle, aka MJ, and we see Spider-Man dating Black Cat, or at least being tied to Black Cat in some way in the tabloids or whatever, this causing that jealousy to surface in MJ. Now, of course, she is a villain, or an anti-hero at least, and though she does often use her skills to help Peter and find herself more on the hero side of things, she ultimately cannot get away from her tendencies for theft and burglary, causing some serious tensions between the two in their relationship. Again, this would be a very interesting addition to the story that I would really like to see. I really like Black Cat and Felicia Hardy. I want to see her in the MCU, so this is a little bit of a kind of personal preference placement on the list. Plus, like I said, we're long overdue to receive her, as she's already been hinted at and needs to be brought into the story officially. Number 3, Betty Brant. Bring back Betty! Now, of course, she will probably be in this movie. Of course, she has been in the first 2 already. Plus, it just makes sense to continue her storyline. Her and Ned do date on and off a lot in the comic books, and so hopefully by the time we return to Spider-Man 3 and the story, we learn that this cycle has continued at least once, if not a couple times, with them getting back together and breaking up again. This time, though, we see her turning her sights to the newly celebritized Peter Parker. Now, Peter and Betty have dated in the comics before, so it would make sense to see this in the films as well. And this would cause some great tension in the story and a 3-for-1 drama sequence, not only testing MJ and Peter's relationship, but causing some rifts between friendships as well. Though it's brief, it is hinted at that to some level Betty and MJ are friends, as the two had planned to initially sit together on the flight to Italy. So with Betty going after MJ's man, it would definitely cause some ending of friendship there. It would also greatly test Ned and Peter's friendship, with Ned's ex-girlfriend now going for Peter. It would definitely challenge this perfectly seemingly smooth relationship the two of them have had so far as friends, and there needs to be a little tension there as well. I feel like with kind of Ned and Peter maybe drifting apart a little bit. Like I said, it would lead for some other great character introduction. When they go off to college, the two of them are actually having some issues between the two, and then ultimately kind of drifting apart because of that. Though again, I would like to see them come back together as friends. I love the Ned character, and I don't want them to break up either, if that makes sense. Ultimately, though, I think this kind of testing of Betty's interest will kind of prove that her and Ned are really meant together, and we'll see them kind of officially come together for a long-term relationship. Number 2, Gwen Stacy. I mean, who doesn't love Gwen Stacy? She is by far my favorite of Peter Parker's girlfriends over the years, and so I definitely want to see her pop up. Unfortunately, though, I just struggled so much to put her any higher than number 2 for a few reasons. For one, we've seen Gwen Stacy done already, and it was done so well in the Amazing Spider-Man films. I love Emma Stone's portrayal of the character, and so to bring in a Gwen Stacy is ultimately going to be highly compared to that character, and it's just going to make it tough to live up to, which means the MCU and Marvel Studios are going to have to do some major tweakings to make a unique adaptation of the character for the films. And these tweaks can be great and have some substantial payoffs. I really love the Zendaya version of Mary Jane. However, these are also a risk and could be detrimental to the character, making her less likable by the masses. So that is a huge part of my reluctancy to put her in at number 1. Plus, since the storyline of Gwen Stacy has already been done, it really wouldn't add anything new or unique to the Marvel MCU, so I had to put her at number 2 and make her just fall short of that top spot in the end. Honorable mention, Liz Allen Toombs. Now, I suspect we'll see a resurfacing of the homecoming love interest in Spider-Man 3, though not romantically, which is why I could not give her an official spot on this list, but I did want to mention the prediction of her appearance, as I think it would be very interesting. Now, I could see her having some very conflicted feelings regarding to Peter and reaching out to him because of this. She, of course, will learn, like everyone else, that he is Spider-Man, and therefore there is some level of blame in her mind for Peter going after her father, putting him in jail, and ultimately ruining her family, aka life, having to move across the country, and all of that. So there's definitely going to be resentment. However, I'm sure it's going to be very mixed, as she did care for Peter and liked him from what it seemed in Homecoming. Plus, there has to be some realization on her side that her father was doing bad and deserved to be put away at some level. So there's definitely going to be some conflict. Do I see an origin story for a future villain? Not likely, though the idea of hinting at her kind of taking up her father's Vulture mantle would be very interesting and kind of a fun kind of twist, much like we saw a female Doc Ock in the Into the Spider-Verse story. It'd be very interesting to see kind of this next generation of Vulture taking on a female lead for that role as well. Again, I just wanted to mention this as a potential pop-up, but since, again, she is not going to be a romantic interest, I couldn't really place her on the top 10 list. Number 1, Cindy Moon. An unusual choice, I am sure you are thinking, for my number 1 spot, as it's not necessarily a major girlfriend from the comic books, but she does have some romantic ties, and I think she can add a ton to this trilogy. Now, if you don't recognize that name, she goes by Silk in the comic books. She is another kind of teen young woman who is introduced to spiders as well and receives her own form of the spider powers. Now, this would create some very interesting looks at the origin story for Peter in this adaptation and creating something completely different than what we've seen before, tying into what Feige has to say about this film in particular. This would mean that not only Peter, but other kids his age were introduced to these spiders and transformed into some form of spider people. Now, we do know that Miles Morales also exists in this universe, as we met his uncle in Homecoming, so this would just round out that whole theory as well, that there are actually multiple spider kids out there in New York running around. This would also allow for the introduction of Spider-Woman, who was hinted at through the potential use of Sword in that post-credit scene as well, as she has much closer ties to Sword than the other web-slinger does, and allow for this character introduction. And this would then allow for the avoidance of her origin story, which could be a conflict with Sony, as we would already know that there's multiple spiders out in the world, and multiple people were introduced to that kind of bite and transformation. I think this just has so much potential, and considering we have not seen any origin story of Peter yet, I think that will be something that we will see explored to some level within the third film through flashbacks or kind of remembering certain aspects, and I think that is something that we really do need to round out this iteration of the character and see something different. Things were kind of hinted at in Far From Home regarding Aunt May going through a lot in recent history, and it's obviously in reference to something to do with Uncle Ben, who we have not met yet in any form. So I just think that we, as fans, want those little hints to this version's origin story, and so I think the third film can do some adaptation of this, and by introducing these other spider people would be a very fun take on something new for that origin story that we haven't seen yet, allowing us to get that story that we want as fans, but still offer something new that we haven't seen so far, which would give some breath of fresh air to that story as well at the same time. So I think this would be fantastic. Love to see Cindy pop up as his love interest. There are, of course, a ton of other female characters that could pop up as references and names that we see in the film as they served as love interests in the past in the comics. And so I hope we do see several of them pop up as well. However, these I had to include on this list as I saw them being able to contribute a lot more to a plot, to the story, and not only to Spider-Man, but in some of these cases to the greater MCU at large. Let me know, though, do you want to see this happen? Do you like the idea of his celebrity causing a mass hysteria of fangirls going after Peter Parker, creating some very interesting storylines, not only for him, but also his relationship for MJ? And if so, what characters would you like to see pop up as those fans and love potential interests? Let me know down in those comments. Now, I really enjoy getting to make this kind of 2-1-1 video, as it was a countdown and also allowed me to do a kind of prediction that I had regarding Spider-Man 3. If you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it, definitely give this video a like, and to catch all my future videos, make sure to subscribe and set those alerts. Until that time, though, I love you all 3,000, and I hope you have a marvelous rest of your day. Bye, friend!